If you stand right in the middle, you can look all around and you will see nothing but just white, no mountains, nothing, just white. And then this really strong blue sky, right? So it just feels totally surreal. And in the middle of those salt flats, suddenly there's this little island that pops up, just this little like island full of cacti, full of these massive cacti, right? And that's just one of the absolutely like crazy scenes. It just feels like you're not on Earth.
This is the Maverick Show, where you'll meet today's most interesting real estate investors, entrepreneurs, and world travelers, and learn the strategies and tactics they use to succeed. And now, here's your host, Matt Bowles.
Hey everybody, it's Matt Bowles. Welcome to the Maverick Show. My guest today is Diego Bejarano Gerke. He is the co-founder and CEO of Wi-Fi Tribe, a close-knit work and travel community of entrepreneurs, freelance consultants, and remote professionals that slow travel the world together while working online. The community currently has over 800 members from 50 different nationalities who join Wi-Fi Tribe's co-living houses for a month at a time in 40 cities around the world. When you join Wi-Fi Tribe, you get to choose how many month-long chapters you want to participate in during the year, pick and choose your locations from multiple concurrent options, hop between continents if you want, and curate your own custom itinerary. The group size of each chapter is usually 12 to 25 people who have all been brought together based on shared values. Diego personally interviewed over 1,000 remote professionals to form the Wi-Fi Tribe community, and Diego has lived in 23 countries in just the last 4 years alone, traveling around with Wi-Fi Tribe. He speaks 5 languages, and he is here today coming at us from Romania. Diego, welcome to the show.
Hey, Matt, thank you very much for having me.
Man, I am so excited to have you on the show. I have known your co-founder, Julia, for probably 2 years now, I want to say at least. We see each other all the time at different Nomad events, and I'm super excited. I wanted to get you on the show for so long, man. So it's so good to have you here. So I am currently today, we are not in person, unfortunately. Otherwise, I would have bought you a bottle of wine, my friend.
Yeah, I was saying I missed out.
Well, next time, as soon as we meet up, we'll make up for that for sure. But I'm actually doing a swing through the United States right now. So I am in Asheville, North Carolina today. And are you in Bucharest, or where are you in Romania?
I'm actually in Cluj in Romania. It's kind of like the up and coming tech part here.
Awesome, man. Cool. Well, let's start back, Diego, just a little bit with your story, because I know you have a really interesting upbringing, and I would love for you to sort of take us through that and talk about how your love and appreciation for travel came about through your upbringing.
Yeah, sure thing. I think it's a little bit unconventional. So when I was a kid, I was probably about 1 year old. We moved out of Germany. My mom's German, my dad's Bolivian. And we moved over to Latin America. So I think the first country we went to was Venezuela. And then we would just keep moving from country to country every 2 to 3 years. So I spent most of my time in Latin America, and a good portion of it also in Europe. First Venezuela, then Mexico. Spent, I think, 2 years in the States. This is all before school still. And then I started school and we went back to Venezuela for the second time. After that, we lived in Oman, of all places. And after that, then we went over to Norway. I ended up studying briefly in Germany, dropped university there again, and decided to finish up studying in the UK. And so that was like the first part of my life, was just a ton of moving around, right? And so now when my parents say that I have to get a real job, I always just tell them, all right, you guys have yourselves to blame. Bro, I'm still going here. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's amazing, man. So when you reflect back on that and you think about that upbringing and how that shaped you, can you talk a little bit about your concept of home, and what does the concept of home mean to you given that background?
Sure. Yeah. That's a really good question. So I think one thing that became apparent is that I would get into a place, and I think as a kid, probably I'd struggle a lot more with this. And I still remember like when I went to Oman, that transition was pretty tough. At first, I was really excited to go to a new place, but then arriving there, it always sucks, right? You're always sitting there being like, all right, I have to start everything from scratch and meet people again. But I think you kind of like train yourself up then as a kid. And yeah, that's kind of shifted the way that I understand what home is, right? Because I never really had an actual home, like a physical home that would be the same. The only thing that was kind of consistent, I mean, obviously family, right? And that is super, super important for kids to have that kind of stability. But I think the other thing that was consistent was just the kind of environment that I found myself in. So the type of people, right? And that was usually international schools, just because, you know, there were a bunch of kids that had to kind of like live in the same kind of expat lifestyle kind of way. And so I think that this environment of just people from all kinds of different nationalities created almost like this subculture, right? A culture that didn't really fit in any one specific country, but it felt kind of like its own thing. And I would only realize a lot later, actually after starting Wi-Fi Tribe, that was what made me feel like home. And when I thought about it, I was like, oh, okay, it kind of makes sense. Because like whenever I was in Germany, surrounded by Germans, and I'm half German, half Bolivian again, I would feel like I wouldn't quite fit into that environment, right? There was just the way that people communicated, the small, subtle, the small jokes, just all the things that were part of that culture, like so ingrained, things that you had to grow up with. I wouldn't know all of those, right? I wouldn't pick up on all of those. It's almost like when you're in you just join a group of people and they've already formed strong bonds. There are these inside jokes. It's almost like an entire country has these inside jokes, right? And you don't really know about them, right? It just takes time to develop those. And the same would happen if I was in an environment with, say, for example, people from Bolivia, right? I'd feel very much the same way. But then whenever I got into this international environment, for some reason, it was like we all understood each other on the same kind of level. And then the first time I really realized this was probably about, 6 months into when we started Wi-Fi Tribe. It was in Croatia, and I was just wondering why of all places on earth, Croatia felt comfortable. Yeah, and I just realized that it was because of the type of people that we were living with in that moment. It was people from all over the world, and that just recreated that environment that I'd grown up with. So yeah, I realized home doesn't really matter that much.
That's awesome, man. I want to also go deeper on and you mentioned that you're half Bolivian, and I want to ask you to talk about your connection with Bolivia, and also what Bolivia means to you, what it's like in Bolivia as well. What is Bolivia like for people that have never been? Because I will tell you, it is probably my number one recommendation that I make to people in the entire continent of South America. And I think it is probably the most, in my opinion, underrated place on the entire continent. And when people go there, I think the experience is so uniquely spectacular because they didn't quite expect it. Like when you go to Machu Picchu, you expect it to be extraordinary, and it is, right? But when you go to Bolivia, I went there with a group of probably 8 people, and we went for about 8 nights, and people went in not knowing exactly what to expect. And like all of our minds were just completely blown. I mean, it was unbelievable. And when I talk to Wi-Fi Tribe participants, I hear that your Bolivia trip, especially when people go with you when you're there, it's like this legendary, sort of Wi-Fi Tribe experience that everybody wants to do at some point in their Wi-Fi Tribe experience. So can you talk a little bit about, your connection with Bolivia, what it means to you, and just describe the country there for people that haven't been?
I'm so happy that you had that kind of experience in Bolivia. That's awesome. And I think that a lot of people have that kind of opportunity because it's exactly what you're saying. Bolivia is definitely underrated as a travel destination. There are similarities with Peru, right? But the big, big, big difference is that Bolivia has no idea how to do marketing, whereas Peru absolutely nailed marketing, right? And that means that you're going to have very few tourists in the country, but also that people don't really know what they're going to get when they go through, right? So it's kind of like the people that find out about Bolivia are the ones who are like, oh, okay, look, I'll give it a try. Let's see what's over there. And then they're like, oh, wow, there's a lot of stuff. I really didn't expect it, right? To describe it as a travel destination, especially if I'm thinking sort of about all the other destinations I've been to, I think Bolivia is, simply put, rough around the edges, right? It's not really been travel didn't come in and then Bolivia said, all right, let me do everything that I can to make tourists comfortable here. It's more like Bolivia is Bolivia, and tourists are welcome to explore it and experience it, but it hasn't been built for us, right? And that's actually, it's fascinating, right? Because you're seeing a country exactly the way that it exists. And yeah, on top of that, it just, being a little bit rough around the edges, to me, Bolivia is just an incredibly adventurous destination. There's a lot of cultural elements, but even those feel very adventurous. And then when it comes to, just to the things that you can do in Bolivia, it's all about being outdoors. And you've got the massive salt flats. I think they are the biggest salt flats in the world. If you stand right in the middle, you can look all around and you will see nothing but just white, no mountains, nothing, just white. And then this really strong blue sky, right? So it just feels totally surreal. And in the middle of those salt flats, suddenly there's this little island that pops up, just this little island full of cacti, full of these massive cacti, right? And that's just one of the absolutely crazy scenes. It just feels like you're not on Earth. It's something so spectacular. And that's one side. And then on the other side, you can get to the Amazon jungle. So a big part of Bolivia is the Amazon jungle. Think of it, it's kind of split into two parts. One is this super high altitude area. That's where the salt flats are. And then you've got the mountain range of the Andes that goes between that. And then on the other side, you can just imagine the beginning of the Amazon rainforest and the Amazon river that then later flows over into Brazil. Yeah. So that's a little on Bolivia. What kind of trips did you do when you were out there?
Oh, man. So we went into La Paz, which was, first of all, it's just extraordinary. It's city is just built into the sides of mountains. They have cable cars, right? Which blew me away. And not just cable cars, because let's be honest, there's a lot of places in South America where I've ridden cable cars. They're a little bit rickety, you get a view. This is the way that regular people get around, and they were manufactured by the company that built, the Swiss Alps cable cars. I mean, these are state of the art, incredible cable cars, and they're taking you around the city, and you're just seeing incredible landscape. And La Paz was just fascinating, I thought, with the witches markets and the Moon Valley, and just landscapes. Even in the city, the landscape even in the city is just incredible. And then we did a mountain bike trip down the world's most dangerous road.
The Death Road.
The Death Road, which was extraordinary. And, it was amazing. And to be honest with you, Diego, I had a good bit of trepidation leading up to that trip, because I'm like, oh man, it's called the Death Road, and I haven't ridden a bike in a really long time, let alone something like this. So I was a little bit trepid about it, to be honest. But then once we got there, we had an amazing guide. They take people down every day. And for folks that don't know, the reason it's called the Death Road is because it used to be the primary commercial transportation route between different points in Bolivia, and it's a one-lane road with no guardrail. And so what used to happen is cars would try to pass each other on a one-lane road with no guardrail and a 1,000-foot drop-off during the rainy season, and one of the cars would go right off the road and drop 1,000 feet, and that would be that. And so you had points where up to 300 people a year were dying on this road, but now they have a commercial, kind of bypass road, highway type of thing. And so, this road is now primarily for, cycling trips and things like that. And so it's quite safe to do, with the guided company and all that kind of stuff. And the scenery was just spectacular. You start up at the top, and it's, cold, and you're wearing your hat and your gloves and your jacket, and you're at the snow-capped mountains. And then you descend, over the course of the day and going down this road. It's just a downhill ride. So it's not a strenuous ride. The whole thing is downhill. And you descend, I think, 10,000 feet. And so as you go down, it's 60 kilometers or so, you are shedding layers. And by the time you get down, you're in shorts and a t-shirt in a rainforest, and you're ready to jump in the lake. I mean, it was unbelievable.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Where can you just bike down and see the vegetation change from, literally 4,000 meters or 5,000 even almost meters altitude of snowy peaks to rainforest. That's absolutely nuts. Surreal.
It was spectacular. The scenery was insane. And then after La Paz, we went over to Cochabamba specifically to see the street art. That's literally why we went. It's rated as one of the top 10 street art cities in South America. And we literally were able to find a street art bicycle tour that was available before we decided to go there. We're like, okay, if this tour is available, we're going for this tour. Because I got a bunch of people that love street art. And so we went over there, and what a total, totally different type of city. Cochabamba is from La Paz. I mean, it almost looked like San Diego. It felt like you were in a completely different place. It was amazing. We went there, and then we went down to Uyuni and did the salt flats, which when I recommend it to people, I make sure that I recommend don't just go and see the actual salt flats, but go on a minimum of a 3-night tour.
Yes, absolutely.
And there you will be going out and seeing, rainbow colored mountains and red colored lagoons and like all, volcanic rock formations that you can hike around. It literally felt like we were on a different planet every single day. Like you woke up and you're like, this feels like a different planet. I had never seen landscape like that ever.
Yeah, that's exactly it. And then, the first time that we did that trip, we went for the 1-day thing. And I had done the 3-day trip, I think already twice before that. And after doing it, I realized, I think we made a big mistake. So, guys, definitely take Matt's word for that. Go for the 3-day trip. You're going to see absolutely crazy things. And you basically rent out this Jeep. If there's a group of you can just have a Jeep to yourselves. And you will literally just drive in this Jeep for hours and hours and hours just through these insane desert landscapes. Right. The first day is the salt flats, but then the next day you're seeing absolutely crazy destinations. It's really, really worth it.
For sure. Yeah. I've never seen landscape like that. And so it's literally my top, South America recommendation. When anybody tells me they're going to the continent, I say, well, in your itinerary, make sure you go to Bolivia and make sure you go for at least a week and do these things. So I'm letting people know, anybody that comes across, has a conversation with me about it, I definitely steer them there. So that's awesome, man. So let's transition a little bit now and talk about the co-founding of Wi-Fi Tribe. So I've been, traveling the world full time with no base since 2013. And when I left, there was no, I started traveling, there was no work travel programs, anything like that, nothing in the space at all. And I know you've obviously been traveling for quite some time as well. So can you talk a little bit about, just the founding of Wi-Fi Tribe and, why you started it and explain what Wi-Fi Tribe is and the value that it offers?
Yeah, for sure. So let's see, that goes back to the end of 2015 for me. That's about four and a bit years ago. I'd basically been working on a bunch of different startups at that point and was just pretty fed up. It was different startup projects. None of them really worked out. And I've been doing that for quite a few years. And so the whole time I was just thinking about, all right, look, if you work really hard today, tomorrow's going to be great. It's that whole idea of like grind hard so that you can build a better future. But, without sort of any time to do any of the social stuff, and, even my own personal professional network was suffering from that. No travel really, like it was literally just, let's see if we can get things to work. So when I got to the fourth startup that wasn't working out, I just told myself, look, whatever's going to happen next, I'm going to fix the lifestyle thing first. And once I've managed to fix that, then I can go back and see if I want to actually, potentially do another startup project, right? So I basically wrote off startups for a while, right? And yeah, first on my mind was just like, okay, well, what is it exactly that I've been missing over the last years? Well, first of all, it was that idea that, okay, I'm getting older and I'm sort of like missing that age where most people tend to start traveling because they have a lot more freedom, right? So I said, all right, travel is definitely one of them. And that's always been important to me. The other one is people, right? I really didn't have much of that social network. So I wanted to just be surrounded by people that inspired me, just, curious, passionate people that you can just strike up a conversation with, learn from, right? That kind of thing. Basically what we're all looking for. And then the third element was that I wanted to be able to keep working as I was doing all of that, right? So I was kind of looking at it as more of a long-term sustainable thing rather than just hopping in and out of those different stages of life. So the only way that could really work out for all those things to come together was basically what we're doing now, right? Like it was just naturally the only thing that we could do. So seeing as we had that house in Bolivia, right? We have this house that's 30 minutes outside of the city of La Paz. So it's actually like, it just feels like you're just in the mountains out there. There's nothing else. And then as you turn a few corners around a few mountains, suddenly La Paz is there. So that, well, why not see if I can spend some time there? It's not going to cost me anything. In the meantime, I'm going to get myself sort of set up as a freelancer, right? I've done a lot of marketing in the startups in the past, so I thought, well, that's a transferable skill. I'd like to see if I can use that for this, right? And then to work out the people part, I decided to just email probably about 100 friends and just asked them, hey, would you like to come along to Bolivia with me? Look, ideally, if you've got some work to do, take it along. We can just work from there. That's kind of what I'm planning to do. And in the weekends, I can show you around basically my home country, right? And show you all those places that we literally just talked about. That was basically, the simple version of it. And one of those people that I reached out to was Julia. So that's the person that you've met, my co-founder. You actually met her way before we got in touch. And she had been at that point already living in South Africa for quite a while working remotely. So she just thought that this whole idea was, a really cool thing. And she was in right away. And then we met up and started talking about it and realized, okay, maybe, we can set this up a little bit more, like with a few more people, because, not that many people were remote when I asked my list of sort of 100 emails that I sent out. So we set up a quick website. I think this must have been 3 weeks before we went out to Bolivia. So it was a super simple Squarespace website, and grabbed that link, posted it in a few digital nomad groups. And yeah, that was it. Then a few weeks later, we arrived in Bolivia, and that was super, super bare bones. At that point, again, Bolivia is not known for great internet. And you can imagine 4 years ago, it had really, really bad internet. And our house, 30 minutes outside the city, even more difficult, right? So that was kind of like our first experience there. Later, we set up this insane network of radio wave antenna stuff to get internet from the city out over into the house. It's the most expensive internet setup we've ever done anywhere, but it's worth it because now we had better speeds out there than anywhere else in the city, right? But yeah, that was a big challenge that we had to overcome at first. But also that first group of people, it was for free. It was literally just friends, come over, let's have fun. The idea wasn't let's build a business out of this. It was literally just, look, I need to change my lifestyle because it really sucks, right? And then as we were out there, we were surprised to see, just how many people were interested in this concept. And we'd already seen some ads go around that Remote Year had been putting out there. And Remote Year at that point was the only other organization that was doing month-long stays for people working remotely. There were a few other organizations that were doing like these, a week or 2 week long retreats, but they were really just mostly retreats. They weren't a lifestyle kind of thing, right? And so seeing some of those ads, we realized, well, okay, maybe Facebook ads worked, right? And that's something that I had been literally just learning as I was doing my whole freelance thing for 3 months or so before kicking off this little project. Yeah. And so we put some ads out there and said, all right, next location, let's see where we're going to go next. We thought, how about Costa Rica? Sounds like a beautiful place, right? And so we were looking for houses in Costa Rica. We zoomed out a bit more. And suddenly we found like this stunning place, right? And we're like, all right, that's got to be it. This place is just so good. It works out price-wise. We can make this happen, right? It was right on the beach. Well, actually on this like cliff. So you had this infinity pool that was just overlooking the ocean. Absolutely stunning, right? Turns out it wasn't Costa Rica. It was in Nicaragua. So our second chapter ever was Nicaragua. And that was it. We just promoted that through Facebook ads. And I will say that I think the only reason that this whole thing worked out is because we figured that one little piece out. Without Facebook ads, I don't think we would have even been able to start this. But yeah, since then, we pretty much just added another chapter every month. It was very much like a very organic, like on a rolling basis kind of thing. We'd ask the people that were there on the chapter with us, hey guys, where do you want to go? What do you think is exciting? We'd put ideas out there. People would say, oh, what about this place, that place? And so bit by bit, our itinerary was just forming as we were moving along, right? So like a super, super organic thing.
That's awesome, man. And Maverick Show listeners know that I've interviewed a number of Wi-Fi Tribe members on this podcast who have described their experience. Danielle Thompson actually went to the Nicaragua house and described her whole experience with that. And Marissa Medin has extensively described her experience with Wi-Fi Tribe. And a number of my interviewees have subsequently done Wi-Fi Tribe chapters, Sean Tierney and Ben Lakoff and other people. So Maverick Show listeners are definitely familiar with, a lot of your Wi-Fi Tribe members and their experiences. And I want to actually take this opportunity to ask you, Diego, about the significance of the name and specifically the word tribe. Can you talk about what the word tribe means to you, why you chose that, and why that is so important?
Yeah, great question. So the focus for Wi-Fi Tribe since the beginning has always been community, right? What we wanted to create was something that was always going to be super tight knit. And so one of the rules that we set early on was, all right, we're going to limit it to max 25 people on a chapter, right? And that's because previously I'd been doing this other startup and we ran these trips. One year we ran a trip to Ibiza. It was for a week. There were 23 members. And the next year we ran it with 40. And we just thought it was going to be, even better because the more the merrier, right? But we realized that the second time when we did that, somehow people just didn't connect in the same way, right? And instead of it breaking down to maybe two groups of, 20, it ended up breaking down into groups of like 2 here, 5 there, 3 there, 4 here, right? So the entire experience was this really like, broken down, fragmented kind of setting. So that was the first component, right? And tribe to me as a word, it does two things. First of all, it really does focus us on what this is ultimately all about, right? This is about human connection, and a tribe is typically seen as a small collection of people living together, right? And that's exactly what we are. And the second part that I really like about it is that it makes us think back to, the time when we actually were part of tribes, right? What's the saying, birds flock, fish school, and humans tribe. It is literally it is just the way that we come together. And to remember that used to be thousands and thousands of years, tens of thousands of years, that was the default way of living for us. And then in this tiny space of time, society just exploded. And with that explosion of society, you'd start to have towns, then you had cities. And in the small space of time, suddenly we were in these mega cities where it was really just us as total individuals living in this crazy mass of people, but with absolutely no connection to anyone around us, right? And the big deal here is that as humans, as a species, we didn't adapt to become that. It moved so quickly that there was no way that anything genetically could have changed that would have said, all right, this is exactly how we need to live. We're still programmed to need what a tribe gives us, right? What we used to get a few thousand years ago, right? But it's just changed so fundamentally. So to us, it's just a reminder that human element is ultimately what we all look for in life, right? Whatever we do, ultimately, that's what it boils down to.
And can you talk a little bit about the Wi-Fi tribe community itself? Who participates in Wi-Fi tribe? How do you curate that community? Who is it right for? What types of people participate in the program?
Sure. Yeah. So we basically have a set of values that we've decided, all right, this is going to be the basis upon which we're going to make any decisions of bringing somebody into the community, right? And the basic belief there is just think about, someone that you've met while you were traveling, and they might have been from somewhere halfway across the world. And for some reason, you just connected with them instantly, right? Compare that to maybe your next door neighbor from back home who, for some reason, you just don't have that kind of connection. I feel that it boils back down to those core values, right? If you have those core values in common, you're much more likely to connect with someone. So that was the basis of all of that, because we did want people to be able to come together from all corners of the world, right? But we had to figure out what would they have in common. So that's really the important part. Obviously, there's, more like specific things that people need to bring in. One of them is that everybody has to come with work. That's really just a requirement because we all need to be on the same page, right? We need to know that everybody else is going to be here working productively, not distracting us. And at the same time, if someone doesn't have much work, they'd be joining and they'd be bored, right? Because everybody else does have this amount of time that they have to dedicate to their work, right? And then the other expectation that we have of everyone joining is just that people get involved, that they participate, that they basically co-create their own experience, right? And we found that the more that people have done that, the more that people have basically given sort of parts of themselves to that experience, the better the experience has been and the more cohesive the entire community has been, right? So that's really what we optimize on site. The other kind of person that typically comes to Wi-Fi Tribe or seeks us out is the kind of person that's just a little bit more comfortable with traveling. It's not absolutely necessary, but we, for example, don't organize flights, right? So there's certain things that if someone really would want all the logistics taken care of, there's other organizations out there that might make that part a little bit easier for you because they literally say, okay, look, all of these things are done. You just have to put yourself into that program, right? For us, there's a lot of people who have done a lot of traveling before mixed in with a bunch of people who are doing it for the first time, right? So it's more of like a peer learning kind of setup. Yeah. And yeah, that's really the main focus. Apart from that, all kinds of different professions. I would say sort of the most common 5 professions are, let's see if I can remember them all. There's marketers, there's writers. So that's more like, copywriters, editors. There's designers, developers. And then another really big portion of the community is entrepreneurs. And then literally, anything else that you can imagine people being able to work on remotely is that long tail. So anything from, we've had electronic musicians to professional poker players, literally a brain surgeon who was there doing a specific study while he was on chapter, right? So yeah, as for professions, it really doesn't matter.
Awesome. Can you talk and expand a little bit on that? And let me ask you just about the concept of diversity. What does diversity mean to Wi-Fi Tribe? How important is it for you? And what, if anything, do you do to intentionally cultivate it?
Yeah, great question. I think diversity is actually a big challenge for a lot of us organizing these kind of communities, because unfortunately, as of right now, it's really the US and Canada that has such an abundance of remote job opportunities, and the rest of the world is really lagging behind on that, right? Even Europe, even Germany. So that's a part that I think, first of all, we can all try to contribute to, see how we can help more people find a path into maybe starting off as freelancers, for example, to be able to set that remote work up for themselves. But yeah, as it comes to diversity, we've been trying to bring together a more diverse community over the last years. Part of that means that when we get to a point on a chapter where the chapter is almost full, we will set aside a few spots within a chapter and aim to fill those spots to balance out the community there. And that can either be a gender balance in case that's necessary, but usually that's quite well balanced. And it can also be a diversity balance, right? And then of course, there's also the professional diversity, but that's really not a big issue because that's quite widespread.
So let me ask you this, Diego. I travel the world with a number of friends of mine who are people of color, and we have pretty candid conversations about the nomad space and work travel programs and different things like that. And, a lot of times I will get feedback in general that, from people of color that say, I'm not sure if, XYZ program or experience would be something that I would be comfortable doing. I'm not sure if I'd feel, safe and comfortable and, all of that in this program, just based on, the demographic that I perceive is, the primary demographic in that program. And I'm wondering, what would Wi-Fi Tribe say to people of color that are listening in terms of, just describing the experience and, is Wi-Fi Tribe a safe and comfortable space for people of color? Is that a priority of the community? And how would you sort of address those concerns?
Yeah. Absolutely. Great question. So that does seem to be a challenge because we've seen that just in the communities, there's unfortunately a small representation of people of color. What we've tried to do at Wi-Fi Tribe is to bring in hosts who represent those different demographics, right? So currently there's, for example, one of our hosts is from Lima, from Peru. She has much more of a native Peruvian background, right? And another one of our hosts is from the UK. She's also a person of color. And we're hoping that by having the sort of the leadership figures of the chapters be representing those demographics, that it just feels more comfortable to be on a chapter, right? And that over time, hopefully that then turns into more people joining, more people of color joining, and that just balancing out a little bit more.
And then same question for, in terms of women, in terms of GLBT community, that sort of stuff, in terms of how you're creating the community. And then if somebody on a Wi-Fi Tribe chapter happened to feel, uncomfortable, whether it be a woman or a person of color or a GLBT person, by, let's say, someone else in the community, or that kind of stuff, is there a mechanism for, once that person's on the chapter, if something happens or, they feel that something inappropriate happened or they're just not feeling safe or comfortable for some reason, and they come to you, is there a way for Wi-Fi Tribe to, redress that? How would Wi-Fi Tribe handle a situation like that if someone happened to feel that way?
Oh, yeah. Perfect. Absolutely. So in those situations, it ultimately boils back down to one thing, right? And that's respect. It's one of the primary values that we have as a pillar for the community. And we use it really for a lot of things, right? It's one of the things that we use to bring people into the community, but we've also used it a lot when we've had to say to people, look, this kind of behavior is not okay. This is not, it's not respectful, right? We've even had to use it on two instances where we've decided to remove two members from the community while they were on chapter, right? So that does boil down to that part. There's always a host from the team on chapter. So we're always there just to make sure that those kind of situations can be dealt with somebody to mediate them. And if it comes to it, to actually take those actions and make those decisions, right? We also do have there's an anonymous feedback form that we send out at the end of every chapter. And one of the first questions that we put in that feedback form is we ask members to have a look again at the values that we've put forward for the community and let us know if they feel that anybody in the community, because, sometimes things don't come up when you're actually on chapter. You just don't mention them, but they still happen and you still feel that it wasn't right, right? So we make it easy for people to tell us there, to give us that anonymous feedback, and we ask them if they felt that anybody specific in the community wasn't living by the values that we had put forward, right? And if we hear the same thing about the same person from a few different people, that's when we'll take action. And if it's a serious situation, we will remove that person from the community, right? So in the space of the last 4 years, as the community has grown, and this has especially happened in the first two up to 3 years, we've removed, I think, either 50 or 60 people so far. Right. So there's both a constant effort to filter people in by the right values, but at the same time also filter people out. Right. And I mean, yeah, it's I guess, a more general answer to that specific case. But to me, it really is ultimately a matter of respect. If someone can't respect someone else because of whatever differences, right, no matter what those differences are or what they're based on, it just doesn't work. Right. That's just not okay.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing that, Diego. I think that's really, really important because as these work travel communities get bigger and larger and more people come into them, there are going to be instances like that. And I think having that mechanism in place, like you've said there, I think that's super, super important. So I really appreciate you breaking that down and sharing that. Let me now also ask you just, in terms of the nomad lifestyle and the work travel itinerant lifestyle, when people are changing their physical locations, changing their accommodations on a regular basis, I want to just ask for your tips on how to maintain a productive working lifestyle and also how to balance the excitement of, the new place that you're in with, needing to be productive at work. So any tips you have on that would be fantastic.
Yeah. Let's see. So I think the top tip that I'd have for everyone is to get yourself some noise canceling headphones. That is, I love them for 3 reasons. First of all, they cancel noise, right? So they let you focus. Secondly, when you put them on, especially if you get the big ones, right? I'd suggest get the big ones, not the in-ear ones. When you put them on, you're signaling to everybody else around you that you are right now, busy working, that it's focus time for you, right? And for the third reason is that every time that I put my noise canceling headphones on, because I always put them on when I'm about to get started with work, it's almost like I am conditioning myself to be productive the moment that I put them on. So to me, just this one little gadget almost feels like kind of like the office that I can just pack in my bag and take with me wherever I go, right? It's a way that I can control my environment and just condition myself for productivity, right? There's other tools like you can get yourself one of those laptop stands. I'm actually using it right now as we're talking. That just lifts up your laptop a little bit, make sure that your posture is good, and that usually comes with one of those add-on keyboards. I think those things are incredibly useful as well. But yeah, that's definitely the most important one to me. And the other thing that I would suggest is that you figure out a small routine, right? Even if it is, I don't know, it can be 10 minutes, 20 minutes. The most important part is that you actually start really, really small. And if you want to grow it out, you add a few more things to it. So I've got a routine now that goes up to almost an hour every morning. And it's just a sequence of different things I do, right? So it starts with some warm-up exercises. Then I'll go into doing just a few different muscle groups, but it's all workouts that I can do from anywhere, right? No weights, nothing, just that I can take it with me, and it's always the same. Then I move on to meditation, stretching, and all of that ends in a cold shower, and then I get my day started, right? Again, that's something that allows me to anchor myself into a routine that I can do no matter where I am in the world, right? And what automatically happens when you anchor yourself is that as soon as you trigger that routine, the beginning of that routine, the rest of your day is pretty much set, right? As soon as I trigger the warm-up exercise, I know what's next. This exercise, then I know what's next. At some point I get to the shower, then I know what's next. And I'm sitting at my laptop and I've started to work, right? This is how you can condition yourself to get the most out of every day, even if everything around you is changing.
I think that's awesome. I think having anchors that are not fixed to a specific geographic location that can move with you, I think that's super, super important. Can you expand a little bit on your, productivity techniques throughout the day? Right? You obviously run a business and, as an entrepreneur, how do you structure your workday to be as productive as possible, right? So you mentioned the morning routine, but then what else do you do, throughout the day? And also, how do you balance your work with, doing fun, cool, exciting stuff in all these neat places?
Yeah, another great one. Especially because for a very long time, I literally was just hosting a chapter now in January in Mexico, and I think I hosted 8 chapters out of the 10 chapters that we did last year, right? So I've been very active on the ground. That obviously takes up a lot of time, and it's not just the time that you're sitting, that you're there actually actioning things and working on chapter related things. It's also all of that extra time that you're spending, in the afternoons, just all the social time, which is time that I love to spend. But you have to bear in mind that you're going to be a lot more socially active when you're on a chapter. So for me, the best way to set up a day productively on a chapter is that I'll try to get up pretty early so that I can do my routine pretty much before anybody else gets up and gets out, and start my day before people are walking around. One of the reasons that helps me a lot personally is that in the morning, people typically have just, you're waking up, you have a quick chat here, a quick chat there. And when there's a number of us, you can quickly get pulled into a few little conversations. If it's very important that you're productive right away, I'd recommend doing something like that, just so that you're the one who's in control of your own time, right? Apart from that, as the day goes by, I don't have very specific structures that I follow, but I've just started recently to get into, there's a book titled Deep Work, and it just has some very interesting concepts about how to take aside time for, there's kind of like 2 different types of work, right? One is what they label deep work, and the other one is shallow work. Deep work is the kind of work that you do not want to be interrupted in, right? Just because of that idea that if you pull yourself out of, say, for example, deep programming work, it will take you, 10, 15 minutes to get your mind back to the level of thinking that you had when you were right before you got pulled out of it. Right. And that's what really kills your productivity. Shallow work, on the other hand, is stuff like, answering emails, basically all that multitasking stuff where you can just jump from one task over to the other. Right. So really figuring out how you can set aside time in the day. And deep work, you typically want to be doing anywhere between an hour and 2 hours of work at a time, where nobody's going to pull you out. Right. Again, this is where the headphones come in. That helps a lot. And as long as you can do a few of those sessions, maybe aiming at 2, probably max 3 sessions a day of deep work, then you know that you're going to be moving things forward. And if you see that over a long period of time, you're not able to get these deep work sessions in, you will quickly notice that your productivity is going to start dropping. Right. The other thing that I've done recently, and this for me, I think has been probably the most impactful thing, specifically when it comes to actually running a business while traveling, is that I started meticulously time tracking. All right. I'm time tracking right now, like absolutely everything, every single task that I do, categorizing those tasks, and even to the point where I'm tracking, breaks and all the other little things that I have. I then use that. So I've built up my own Excel spreadsheet for that. And then I use that to understand where my time goes. Right. And I've already identified a number of areas where I realize that if I keep on investing my time in this way, I am going to slow the company down, because I need to invest my time into something else that's going to move us forward a little bit more quickly. Right. So it's just back to that old idea of, if you can't measure it, you can't track it, and then you can't improve.
Awesome. Let me ask you one more question that I get asked a lot about the nomad lifestyle, and I want to get your take on it. People ask me about finding love as a nomad. How do relationships work in a location-independent, itinerant lifestyle? Any input or tips or advice that you have on that, Diego?
Oh, that's an awesome one. Yeah. So I wouldn't know how to find love in this kind of lifestyle, because I've been with my girlfriend now for, she's going to kill me if I get it wrong, I'm going to say 7 years. It's been a long time. So basically, before we started this whole thing, we were already together. But interestingly, she worked at a different company, Rome. Actually, in case you've heard about it, Rome is, so it's not We Rome, it's Rome, that the location that had or the company that had several permanent locations. And that meant that she was kind of like semi-nomadic. She had to be on site when they were setting up those spots. And then when she didn't have to be on site, she would come and join me as we were traveling around the world. As much as I it looks like I have a remote job or a location independent job. For the last 4 years, my job actually wasn't location independent because I had to be on the chapters that we were running, right? So that made it a little bit more difficult for us at that point. My recommendation for people trying to find love in this kind of lifestyle, let's see, the challenging part is finding a partner who has that same lifestyle. So what you probably want to do is put yourself into different situations where you're more likely to find those kind of people, right? Whether that is joining co-working spaces, and there I'd really recommend to join co-working spaces with really active communities, right? Because it's one thing to just go to a co-working space and another thing to really have an active community around it. The dojo in Bali is a fantastic example of a very active community, right? Another example is obviously something like what we're doing. There's something called Nomad Soulmates, right? And they're literally building an app for people who are traveling, working remotely, and who are single, who want to find a partner, find love. Right. So there are a few of those different things out there that'll just make it more likely for you to meet somebody. But ultimately, I mean, there's probably a few different things that sort of come into that formula of making it more likely for somebody to find love. One of them is just to meet enough people, right? Making sure that you're meeting enough people, in this case, who are also remote. And the second one is the experiences that you share with those people and your proximity to those people, right? Are you meeting a lot of people on a really superficial level, or are you really, really meeting a lot of people? Like, are you connecting with a lot of people? And that just obviously increases your chances.
Awesome. Let's change gears a little bit. I want to ask you, just sort of from the entrepreneurial perspective, as a business owner and as a CEO, take us behind the scenes a little bit of running Wi-Fi Tribe. How do you manage a fully distributed staff across different continents and time zones? Can you share a little bit of that?
Sure. The first thing that comes to mind is you need to find one time that works in every time zone. You need to peg your weekly team meeting to that specific hour, and it just needs to stay there. Right. And then you need to tell your team, guys, I don't care from where you work, that, we've got complete freedom, but this time, there's this 1 hour every week that we all have to be able to make it for calls. Right. Otherwise, it gets incredibly difficult if you have people that are on one side of the world, in San Francisco, and then on the other side of the world in Japan, for example, and you've got something crazy like, maybe 15-hour difference, right? Where 6 a.m. can be an 11 p.m. Right? You have to make sure that everyone is in agreement on that one time that overlaps. The other part is just putting everything in writing, right? Over communication at this point. We use Slack. It's a really common tool. We actually also use that within the community. So we're kind of like using that for two purposes. We've completely stepped out of email because email is really only what we use when we're in contact externally with people outside of the team. And that's just because everything that is on Slack is visible to everyone else in the team, right? It just makes it so much easier for everyone to be in a loop and in the know, so that you don't have these silos of information that somebody holds onto and that other people don't have access to, right? And then apart from that, probably to try to minimize calls. We used to have a lot of calls and realized that was taking a lot of time, a lot of energy. You need to really make sure that you focus the little time that we can invest into calls, and make sure that you get to decisions, you get outcomes from those calls.
Awesome. And then do you guys meet in person at periodic intervals?
Yeah. And now that's a perfect example. It is the first time. So the first time that we did that was at the beginning of this year, that we managed to bring the whole team together in one location, which is absolutely ridiculous for a company that does this literally every single day for other people, right? But we never managed to get ourselves together in one location. And when we did it, we realized, okay, this is absolutely essential. How did we ever, work without this for the last 4 years? So what we're trying to do now is to build in a retreat environment, ideally twice a year. If we can manage it, it could even be 4 times a year, so potentially once a quarter, so that it feels like this longer term sprint where you're setting everything up together, you're getting excited together, you're setting up goals, you're brainstorming all the different things that you're going to be working on, and they say, all right, guys, now spread around the world, do your thing, let's get this thing done, right? And we'll reconvene, in 6 months' time, and we'll have another conversation. What happens if you don't if you don't have these kind of situations where the team can meet each other, is that those relationships just don't really build, right? And I think in order for the team to really want to help each other out, right, to really step up, to support each other, which is critical in team dynamics, you need to be able to form that friendship within a team.
Awesome, man. And I know that you have overseen the marketing operations of Wi-Fi Tribe since the beginning. And you mentioned that initial sort of Facebook advertising strategy that got you guys off the ground there. I'm wondering now, many, many years later, what types of marketing techniques, and I'll just sort of preface this with, obviously, as business owners, our favorite, way to get business is number one, through repeat business, and number two, through referrals of satisfied customers, of course. But in addition to those two, and I know you guys have a lot of both of those, but in addition to those two, what types of marketing techniques are currently working for Wi-Fi Tribe now to get you new customers and in front of your target market?
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So as for the referrals, that is obviously one of the biggest ones, and you got that spot on. The repeat is another really, really important one. And I'll say to that, very interestingly, in the first year, we probably only had about 15%, so 15% of people who would do a chapter coming back for another chapter, right? Which is really, really little. And then in the second year, that jumped up to 87%, right? So there's just this massive, massive jump. And in my opinion, Wi-Fi Tribe only really turned into Wi-Fi Tribe as soon as that happened, right? I still know the chapter. It was in Lima, in Peru, and all those members that went on that chapter and are still, traveling with us today. They always talk about that, right? And they'll say, "Oh yeah, we were on the first real one," and that's because this whole thing doesn't exist if we can't see each other again and again and again. That's the whole point, right? If we don't do that, then all we really are is this retreat that exists in one moment in time. And there's no long-term community, no idea of long-term friendships, right? And that's fundamentally not what we are, right? As for what has worked that isn't that, well, Facebook ads were the most important thing for us up until about a year ago, maybe a bit more, a year and a half ago. We suddenly realized that the prices had gone up so much. And that's not just because competitors came in and started advertising a lot, but rather because you've got, the big companies of the world, the Pepsis, the Coca-Colas, that are able to put insane budgets into Facebook ads. And the audience that they're targeting, it's the same audience that you're targeting, even though you're targeting them for different reasons, right? So that became too expensive to actually work out. But Google ads, that in the beginning didn't work out because there was literally no market, right? Nobody was searching for this thing. They suddenly started working out. It took about a year, maybe a year and a half into us starting into Wi-Fi Tribe, that we realized, okay, now is a time when people are starting to search on Google. So that's definitely a big part of what's working for us right now. And then we've moved a lot of our attention over to partnerships, right? So we're spending a lot of time, a lot of effort right now in nurturing long-term partnerships. We're always excited to collaborate in any way that we can with other organizations that are, working to help out the same kind of audience. We just believe that that's where we can generate long-term value without having to pay for, every single click.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So, all right, let's talk about if people are interested in doing Wi-Fi Tribe. How do they get started? What are their options for participation in Wi-Fi Tribe?
Right. So there's an application process that everybody has to go through to join the community. It's got 4 steps to it. And one of those is there'll be an interview. It's typically 30 to 40 minutes long with one of us from the team. As long as all of that goes well, obviously it's a two-way thing as well. So we will give everyone the chance to ask a bunch of questions as well so that we can really figure that fit out on both sides. As long as that all goes well, and the person gets invited to join the community. If they then decide to join, then they have the option of literally joining on any chapter that's available at that time, right? So we don't select specifically per chapter, but rather we have a general selection process that brings people into the community as a whole. And then they basically have access to all the locations that we go to. At that point, it's just a matter of finding a place that's available. That's unfortunately recently become a little bit more difficult. We used to have people joining a lot more spontaneously on chapters, but now those typically get booked out 2, sometimes 4 months in advance, with some crazy locations booking out like 9 months in advance or so. So that's one recommendation I have to people, is to try to start planning a little bit further in advance, as that has just been a general shift.
Awesome. So they come in, they join the community, they pay a small fee up front, then they're a member, and then they can choose how many locations they want to go to over the course of the year. They can travel for a full year, 6 months, 3 months, 1 month, whatever it is. They pick their number of locations, and it's a little bit cheaper if they choose more locations in a single year per location, right?
That's it.
And then they just get to pick which locations they want to do. So you guys have concurrent, simultaneous options on different continents, and people can hop around and just pick the locations that are the most exciting for them and basically curate their own itinerary. And then they'll have a group of Wi-Fi Tribe community folks there, whichever one they pick. Correct?
Yeah, that's exactly it. So the more chapters that someone does, obviously the price does go down with that. And we usually have 4 or 5 different locations running at the same time. So that'll be across the 5 continents, Europe, Africa, Asia, North and South America.
Awesome. And then you mentioned the Slack community a minute ago, Diego. I wanted to just expand on that as well. When somebody joins the Wi-Fi Tribe community and they come into it, can you talk about the value of that virtual online Slack community and what that's like?
Yeah, for sure. So that's just a space where all of us can interact, and we join it right in the moment that we join the community. So not even when we're on chapter for the first time. It's also the tool that we use on chapter to organize anything. But when we're off chapter, it allows us to, for example, do meetups anywhere in the world. What's very typical is that members will get together and, for example, organize little mini trips between the chapters, right? Because we have a gap week between each chapter. In South America, for example, people have used it to organize. There was a trip to Galapagos Islands. There was a sailing trip. There's actually another sailing trip happening in a few weeks. There's obviously that the trip to Machu Picchu, Patagonia, right? So all these dreamy destinations. People just throw those ideas out there and then get together to go on those trips in between, right? And what's actually been so there's obviously a bunch of other channels like jobs, gigs, just conversations around different topics, whether it's related to remote work or specific professions, right? So all those different things exist there. But what's been really interesting to see now is that for the first time, a member has taken the tradition that we have within the community, which is we'll meet up every Tuesday to just to hang out, Tribal Tuesdays, to talk about basically what we want to do over the weekend, the different adventures we want to plan together. But really, more than anything, it's a social moment where everyone comes together. So this person took that tradition out of a chapter and started to organize this in New York with any tribe member who's in New York on a weekly basis, right? So now we have that first instance of weekly meetups that are happening outside of chapters.
That's so awesome, man. All right, Diego, at this point, are you ready to move in to the lightning round?
All right, let's do this.
Let's do it.
The lightning round.
All right, what is one book that has greatly impacted you over the years you'd recommend people check out?
Oh, that's definitely Tony Hsieh's Delivering Happiness.
Awesome. What is an app or productivity tool that you're currently using that you would recommend?
Okay. I love Noisely. It's basically something that lets you play all kinds of different background sounds and drowns out just about any noise, especially if you've got those lovely noise canceling headphones.
Awesome. What is one travel hack that you can share with folks that you use?
Right. I think at this point, I'd say it's going to be the neck stand or the roost stand, something just to lift up your laptop so that you're making sure that you're not going to ruin your posture.
All right, Diego, if you could have dinner with any person that's currently alive today who you've never met before, who would you choose and why?
I'm unfortunately going to be really boring and kind of say the same answer. It's going to be Tony Hsieh. That book has had a massive impact on me. The basic lesson that I got out of it is that you need to put culture first. And in our case, that applies to company culture, but it also applies to the culture within a community. And every decision that I've made around our community and our team has been applying the principles that I've learned from this book.
If you could go back in time now, knowing everything that you currently know, and give one piece of advice to your 18-year-old self, what would you say to 18-year-old Diego?
Good question. I would tell 18-year-old Diego to not to start a startup right away, but rather to join a startup company.
Awesome. All right, last 2 questions are travel related. What are your top 3 favorite travel destinations you've ever been you'd most recommend people check out?
Okay, so super biased, but I'm going to say Bolivia, just so that we can get that out the way. Second one's going to be there's these islands off the coast of Venezuela in the Caribbean. Absolutely stunning. Put it on your bucket list, but maybe add a 2050 date to it until the country's stabilized. And then the other destination is going to be the Cocora Valley in Colombia. That is absolutely stunning.
Amazing. Is there a name for the Venezuelan islands? How do people find them?
They're called Chichiribichi.
Okay, cool. We'll put all this stuff in the show notes, folks. So you can just go to one place at themaverickshow.com. We're going to list out the travel destinations and all the other stuff that we talked about. We're going to have links to everything in one place. So just go to the show notes for this episode. We'll have it all spelled out and linked up. All right, last question. Diego, what are your top 3 bucket list destinations? These are places you've never been that are the highest on your list you'd most like to see.
Right. So I definitely need to go to South Africa. It's one of our destinations, and I just can't believe I haven't been there yet. Everyone's raving about it. I need to go to Australia. And we're going to Hawaii for the first time this year, but I couldn't make it. So that's the 3rd place on my list.
Amazing. Awesome. Diego, this has been amazing having you on the show. I want you to let people know how they can find you, connect with you, follow you on social media, and how they can join the Wi-Fi Tribe community and do a chapter.
Right. Perfect. So you can always find us on wifitribe.co, right? Not .com.co, or just look for Wi-Fi Tribe on Google. The same goes for Instagram. It's wifitribe.co, and on Facebook, it's just Wi-Fi Tribe. So that's the easiest way to find us. I know we're also going to be adding, I think, the link to the show notes here. So that's another really easy way to get there. And just a quick heads up, this is really relevant for you guys. We do have a special discount that we're going to be giving out to any of the listeners to the Maverick Show. And that's an extra $100 credit that will be credited back from that join fee on the person's first chapter after joining, right? So really important, please mention the Maverick Show.
Awesome, folks. We are going to have the link in the show notes. So just go to themaverickshow.com and just go to the show notes for this episode, and your link and how to get that $100 discount on your first Wi-Fi Tribe chapter is going to be right there. Diego, this has been fantastic, man. Thanks for coming on the show.
Awesome, Matt. Thank you so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
All right. Good night, everybody.
Be sure to visit the show notes page at themaverickshow.com for direct links to all the books, people, and resources mentioned in this episode. You'll find all that and much more at themaverickshow.com.
Do you want to learn how to travel the world for a year plus with carry-on luggage only and look good while you're doing it? Go to themaverickshow.com/packing to see a free recorded webinar and learn exactly how Matt does it. He shows you the luggage he uses, the specific items he packs, and the travel brands he likes most. Even if you're just looking to go on shorter trips, but pack more efficiently and eliminate your checked luggage, you won't want to miss this. You can watch the free recorded webinar at themaverickshow.com/packing.
Would you like to get Maverick Investor Group's white paper on real estate investing for digital nomads? How to buy U.S. rental properties from anywhere in the world and finance an epic international lifestyle? Just go to the Maverick